For KBRFradio.com News, I'm Derek Sidian, and this is the weekly news recap. During Monday's Fergus Falls City Council meeting, the second reading of the Ordinance 58 occurred, and the City Council failed to pass it into law. Ordinance 58 would alter zoning laws and determine what areas within the city a business can sell or manufacture marijuana. According to the ordinance as written, cannabis businesses would not be allowed to sell marijuana in the downtown area. The retailers that are currently selling hemp downtown, namely Sugar High and Elevate, would still be able to sell their current products, but when the government gives out marijuana licenses, they would not be able to sell full marijuana at their current locations. Emily McCune, the owner of Sugar High, was the first to the public lectern.
I'm tired and I'm confused and I'm frustrated. If we're talking about opinions, it's as ridiculous as me to get up here and say, well, my opinion is that having alcohol downtown and the city of Fergus Falls profiting off of alcoholism and addiction shouldn't be allowed. You don't get to pigeonhole cannabis and set it aside from tobacco and alcohol. If you do, you are using your opinion on that substance.
After McCune's passionate rebuttal and questioning of the council, a couple of concerned constituents also voiced their feelings toward the ordinance.
If we're aiming for economic growth in downtown Fergus Falls, we absolutely need to be prioritizing free operation of businesses downtown, regardless of whether or not you agree or disagree with the products they're selling. They are legal.
West Lincoln Avenue is a B6 zone. You're concerned about not allowing two established cannabis businesses very nicely situated in downtown Fergus Falls, but then having the cannabis businesses front and center as tourists and other people drive into Fergus Falls. It makes absolutely no sense.
The last member of the public to speak was Chris Stack, the owner of Elevate.
Others have spoke about some public safety concerns with zero facts or statistics to go along with this.
Council member Scott Kwame started his own comments with,
first of all, I think it's not appropriate to say that we would be closing or moving anybody. This isn't about closing or moving anybody. This is about what would be coming, which is the legalization of recreational marijuana. It wouldn't affect what's currently happening, and the businesses that currently exist could concurrently exist and continue doing what they're doing. But more than anything, for me, I think the future of Fergus Falls is young families and children. And my view is that this is not a family-friendly business, not a family-friendly product. It doesn't serve to develop a family-friendly culture.
In a shocking statement to those gathered, Kwame also said,
and in my view, this is a fair compromise. Going with B6 and industrial zoning doesn't deny anybody access to anything. They can find it, and if they can't, then they're too stoned to find it, well, they've got bigger problems. But it's going to be here.
After discussions were closed, the council took a vote on the initial draft of the ordinance that would exclude downtown from cannabis retailing. Council members Kwame, Job, Rachels, and Krameyer voted in favor, while members Rufer, Fish, and Hicks voted against. Per the City Council Charter, the ordinance needed 5 votes in favor to pass, and it failed to do so. The issue now goes back to the Cannabis Committee to try to find a new compromise that would be able to pass the council and hopefully help alleviate the concerns of the public. At around 5:15 on Sunday evening, the Ottertail County Sheriff's Office responded to a motorcycle crash in Dunn Township, just northeast of Pelican Rapids. According to officials, initial information reported that the adult operator, since identified as 21-year-old Wesley Laframbois of West Fargo, had serious injuries. Life-saving measures were conducted at the scene, but were ultimately unsuccessful. Laframbois was wearing protective equipment, including helmet, jacket, and gloves, and alcohol is not believed to be a factor. At around 5:15 on Saturday evening, the Ottertail County Sheriff's Office responded to a report of a structure fire in the 23,000 block of 270th Street in Ardell Township, just north of Fergus Falls. The initial report indicated that a barn was on fire. However, when the Sheriff's Office and Fergus Falls Fire arrived to the scene, they found a shed engulfed in flames. Although the shed was a complete loss, there was no property inside and no injuries were reported. According to officials, the fire was purposely lit to demolish the building, but it got out of control, causing minor damage to another building. A citation was issued by the Sheriff's Department for burning prohibited materials. 54-year-old Martin Gene Krenz of Underwood has been accused of stealing over $3,000 from his former employer. According to court documents, the district manager of a business in Otter Tail City reported that Krenz had taken 2 separate cash deposits from the store on November 23rd and 24th of 2023, totaling $3,464. For both dates, documentation showed that Krenz had acknowledged receipt of the store cash receipts, but there is no documentation of deposits at the bank, and the cash was not otherwise returned to the store. Ultimately, Krenz denied stealing the money, though when the sergeant said that charges would likely be brought up against him, he allegedly offered to come up with the money. Krenz made his initial Rule 8 appearance on Monday, June 17th. 62-year-old Joseph Andrew Cross was arrested at around 7:42 Monday evening after resisting arrest in downtown Fergus Falls. According to court documents, the arresting officer witnessed a man get off a bike and climb into Cross's vehicle, which promptly took off from the lot it was parked in. The officer attempted to follow the vehicle and noted that the window tint was too dark. The vehicle drove across multiple streets, which the officer noted seemed similar to evasive maneuvers. After driving a couple blocks around, the vehicle parked on the street next to the lot it had left from and dropped the other man off, who ran to his bike, mounted, and took off at a high rate of speed as the officer initiated a traffic stop on Cross's vehicle. Cross told the officer that he had come from his residence and was returning there, and when the officer asked if he had made any stops before the traffic stop, Cross claimed he hadn't and that he hadn't had contact with anyone. He then told the officer that he was going to Perham, and when the officer asked why, Cross asked if that was important. The officer then inquired about the bicyclist, and Cross said that he had picked him up and brought him where he wanted to go. As Cross was talking to the officer, he allegedly kept reaching to his side, appearing to manipulate an object out of the view of the officer, and was told to keep his hands visible. When Cross eventually made his hands not visible to the officer, he was told to exit the vehicle, which he refused. Cross became agitated and started manipulating an object behind his back and side, near where one might keep a firearm or other weapon, so the officer began to reach into the car to grab him and continued to command him to exit the vehicle. After the officer pulled Cross out of the vehicle, Cross pulled away from him and continued reaching where he had before. The officer told Cross to stop resisting, and after more attempts at getting away from the officer, was escorted to the ground and placed under arrest. Cross continued to push off the ground against the officer until additional Fergus Falls Police Department personnel arrived to assist. In the area Cross was resisting, officers found a baggie of what would later be confirmed to be 3.5 grams of methamphetamine. The officer went to the emergency room, where it was confirmed that his fibula had been broken, as well as multiple scrapes against his skin. Cross faces felony charges of obstructing the legal process with force and possession of methamphetamine. On Thursday, 34-year-old Dilfa Mungia pled guilty to first-degree sale of drugs as part of a plea agreement. Mungia was arrested in September of 2023 after a 4-month-long investigation by the Fergus Falls Police Department. On September 5th, the police department executed a search warrant at Mungia's Fergus Falls residence for illegal controlled substances. In her room, officers located a plastic baggie with a white substance that later tested positive for methamphetamine and weighed 23.6 grams. Law enforcement also located pay-o sheets and a purse with $4,068 in cash, 16 oxycodone pills in a kitchen cabinet, Suboxone strips, and miscellaneous drug paraphernalia. Mungia was charged with multiple levels of felony sale of drug charges, but on Thursday she made a plea agreement and pled guilty to 1 count of first-degree sale of drugs, though the full details of the agreement are unknown at this time. Patients coming to Lake Region Healthcare's Fergus Falls Emergency Department will use one central entrance at the main front door of the hospital building as of June 21st. In the past, patients had the option to use the drive-in garage when presenting to the emergency room for care. The garage will be accessible only to arrivals by ambulance going forward. There is a variety of fraud activity, including recent messages pretending to be MnDOT, saying you have an invoice, violations, or toll-by-plate bill from using the Minnesota Easy Pass Express lanes. This is a scam, as Minnesota doesn't have license plate tolling. Scam artists send what might seem like an official email or text with an urgent message to click on a link or respond to the message in some way. Don't respond. You could be duped into giving away sensitive data, including personal identity or credit card information. 51-year-old Gerald Floyd Crane Jr., a man convicted of multiple sexual offenses against minors, has had his latest sentence of 13 years in prison lessened to 5 years of probation due to a prosecutor's mischaracterization of innocence during closing arguments. Crane was arrested in June of 2020 for sexually assaulting his 5-year-old grandniece in her home in Ottertail County, which the parents learned about after 2 of his other grandnieces, ages 4 and 7, came forward about their own incidents with their uncle. Crane was eventually convicted on 4 of the 5 charges of criminal sexual conduct and sentenced to 13 years at the Minnesota Correctional Facility in St. Cloud. However, his attorney sent a request to the courts for an appeal. They claim that the prosecuting attorney committed misconduct by misstating the presumption of innocence during the closing arguments of the case, and the appellate court ultimately agreed with the defense. Ottertail County Attorney Michelle Eldine says that the issue of prosecutorial misconduct is a hot topic, especially in Minnesota. The appellate court remanded the original trial and stated that Crane had the right to a new trial. According to Eldine, at that point in the judicial process, it is determined whether to go through with a new trial or resolve it with a plea agreement, and that especially in cases where the victim is a young child, the prosecution will consult with the victims and their families to determine what they feel is just and right at that time, which in this case led to a plea agreement for the defendant. Crane has now pled guilty to second-degree criminal sexual conduct with a minor under 13, and will be on probation for 5 years, as well as needing to register as a predatory offender, have no contact with the victim, and have no unsupervised contact with minors under the age of 18. Crane was previously convicted for 2 counts of 5th-degree criminal sexual conduct in Anoka County in 2022, and another charge for having, quote, routinely slept with his minor child female, end quote, in Sibley County 2005. For KBRFradio.com News, I'm Derek Sidian, and this has been the Weekly News Recap. Subscribe to the KBRF Radio YouTube channel and tune in every Friday at 5 to stay up to date with local news. Get more news at KBRFradio.com or on the Fergus Now app. Sign up for email news sent right to your inbox, delivered by Cooper's Office Supply.